Warm greetings. Let's discuss today Viksit Bharat at 2047. First of all, we need to also talk about Viksit India, Viksit Bharat, because right now India is torn between India and Bharat, and this is something serious for me also to look at. Nevertheless, today we look at and deep dive into the very idea of Viksit India. And if you look at their website, viksitindia.com, it writes bold vision, brighter future, so on and so forth. And the interesting part is that it is aimed for 2047, which is 100 years of India's independence. Now, there has not been yet a parliamentary discussion on it, but the work is going full-fledged. And I recall from last year's the Governing Council meeting from Niti Aayog on Viksit Bharat. And this is where I want to bring your focus on, for whom is this Viksit Bharat? So Viksit Bharat for the future. When we talk about Viksit Bharat for the future, and when we see how the Governing Council meeting happening between 60 or 50 men, only 2 women, and not a single person under the age of 30 or 40 who are actually going to be leading the 2047 time of India. No one part of this conversation or meeting or discussion, then they have to continue doing the crap which is right now happening. So it's really what we lay the foundation for Viksit Bharat today is something which is highly questionable, and I want to go back to the foundation laid post-independence by our great independence freedom fighters and the leaders who led the country in the initial time. And often we see the current dispensation keep talking about we did not achieve anything in 70 years. And I want to bring to your notice that if we had not achieved our democracy, if we had not achieved our education level, if we had not achieved our health level, technology, we would not have been where we were at 2013. Because that was the narrative which was used in 2013, that we have not achieved anything. One thing for sure, that we had our democracy intact, we had our judiciary in place working sound, we had our election commission working sound, we had many government CID working sound, ED working sound, EC working sound, RBI working sound. Those were all still institutions which we could trust upon and think about. Today, I can't even trust the judiciary, and personally, I have problems with that, with my own mother's situation. But keeping all those aside, if in 70 years we laid such a foundation that here is a company or a party which comes to destroy every bit of it, and now talking about a Viksit Bharat with an imagination of 2047 and laying some ideas where their first point is actually Yuva, which is youth, Garib, which is poor, Mahilai, which is woman, and farmers, which is Annadata. And look at the way they are treating youth, poor, women, and the farmers. By the way, their document where they talk about the 4 pillars of Viksit Bharat have these 4 as pillars, but they are not part of the discussion. No farmer in the discussion, no Mahila in the discussion, no poor in the discussion, no Yuva in the discussion. Then it is a bunch of manuals, the masculine approach of doing things that we know, and we have the responsibility to tell what is good for the society and what should be done. This is exactly the way the Viksit Bharat mission and vision is basically crafted. And then there is a problem, if that is the way it is crafted, is what are we really talking about inside it? They have a very elaborate vision and mission, but other than the first objective where they write these 4 pillars, all these 4 pillars disappear from their vision, because the vision eventually goes down to making India USD 30 trillion to USD 40 trillion by 2047. So first of all, the 5 trillion already changed to 30 trillion, and then by 2047, 40 trillion economy. Where are these 4 pillars in that 40 trillion economy? And this is all crafted by Niti Aayog. Niti Aayog itself has no woman in its committee of Viksit Bharat. There's no youth in the committee. There is no farmer, Of course, there is no poor person in the committee. Then what are we talking about? So all these four pillars are only on paper, because it is about economic growth, and they have this projection, as I just mentioned. They do talk about social development goals and progress, but we live in a country where every 16 minutes a woman is molested or raped, which is a recorded number, by the way. If we count the unrecorded and do some projection, it will be much more. We are currently in a situation where just yesterday, 40 children got sick in Bihar. Last month, in Indore, children died of contaminated water. Yesterday, a child was burned alive, a newborn child, because the nursing staff forgot to switch off the heating system. Some time ago, in Madhya Pradesh, children got sick out of medical syringe or cough syrup. Where are we talking about? These were the people who are going to lead the country in 2047. If we cannot have their safety at first, if we cannot have safety of the women, what are we going to give to them? But for whom are we making this Viksit Bharat? That is the question, and that question actually revolves around these four pillars, which is nicely written. So actually, the Viksit Bharat document, developed most likely by Niti Aayog, is a very nicely rosy picture document, which every policy document has to be, is like that. Farmers kept protesting. Nobody heard about it. We have the highest farmer suicide rate in the world. We have a huge population which lives below the poverty level. And the poverty has actually gotten from bad to worse. I am not saying that everything was rosy and nice in 2013, 2010. We could see the work in progress, but now I see the work in digress, work in distress, the work in destruction. I don't see in 2047 we can actually achieve the Viksit Bharat we are talking about. And probably the ministers of that time are going to curse the present day ministers exactly the way the present day ministers are constantly dragging Nehru to everything without realizing where did we start post-independence, when we became such a weak country with no resources, very weak GDP. Where did we reach in 2010? And it has a huge contribution of every leader who laid their life to making this country. But what was achieved in 2014, from where to arrive to 2047, is a big question mark. Employment problems, unrest problem, the youth is fighting with each other in the name of religion. Farmers are making protests for their demands, for their requirements to feed the country. And now with the new US trade deal, the farmers will be heavily compromised, because most of the products will flood Indian market with US products. So where are the farmers in it? What is the plan for alleviating the rest of the poor? Instead of removing the poverty, the whole plan is actually removing the poor. And all these children who are dying are not from the ministers' houses, are from the poor families, from the government hospital, from the government school. So I feel this is some kind of a planned strategy to depopulate the country, with keeping the elites at one safe, and having huge infrastructure developments of high-speed train, of this train and that train. I really don't see any hope in the way Viksit Bharat is imagined. And the idea of Viksit Bharat is very closed idea, because it does not have the inclusivity. In the very first decision-making team, if there is no inclusivity, I do not see that the inclusiveness will be percolating into the implementation of the Viksit Bharat plan. We may have the biggest roads, biggest bridges, highest, tallest statues, you can name it. We may have these fancy light shows and everything. We may have a lot of infrastructure in place, but let's talk about the digital infrastructure, which is so much fancied, but the whole election commission's SIR itself did not carry out the digital infrastructure platform. the whole Viksit Bharat itself is not using the digital platform as an interactive tool for us to engage in the digital or the Viksit Bharat program. So I don't know, even the huge infrastructure setup which is being planned, if it is not in place, how are we going to talk about making those reforms? And then coming to the governance reforms, these are all, by the way, points from the Viksit Bharat agenda, which is there in their website. Governance reforms, what kind of governance reforms we are talking about when the leader of opposition himself is not allowed to speak in the parliament? What reforms are we talking? The prime minister himself did not make a review of the presidential address, and it is never in the history of Indian parliamentary affairs that the LOP is not allowed to speak, and the Speaker of the House is actually making such bizarre statement that the life of Prime Minister is at threat. I think this is not a governance reforms. This is not an enabling environment. If there is no enabling environment inside the parliamentary affairs, I cannot imagine an enabling environment outside in the public domain. Look at the way Speaker is biased towards the opposition parties' ministers, and when the ruling party ministers talk about the parliamentary affairs ministers is always getting up and talking every time, and trying to block the other ministers to speak from the opposition parties. So what is the speaker doing? So there is no governance reform happening, and the whole governance reform is actually shifting from democratization to centralization. More and more power are getting closer to Delhi, closer to the central government, and slowly we are losing all the division of powers, because we have to constantly remind that we are union of states. And unless and until the delegation of reforms and the powers are to the states, and I hope, which is my biggest hope in the Viksit Bharat program, that we actually still live that democracy. We still have the union of states who can exercise the powers. Because when the Viksit Bharat last meeting happened, it was all only ruling party ministers who were attending. So we want to talk about a Viksit Bharat with one party, one nation. Is that the idea? And that is not a governance reform. That is a serious problem. Although they talk about the challenges of Viksit Bharat in their document as challenges of environment, which is rightfully so. India is out of the 100 most polluted cities in the world, India has more than 90 cities. What environment are we talking about? Water pollution, water crisis. We have some of the most polluted rivers in the world. We are among the top 10 countries to face water crisis, and water crisis is not only flood and drought, but it is also asymmetric access to the water and sanitation to the poor. So the marginalized we see are getting more marginalized, and then we can actually bring it back to the economic agenda of the Viksit Bharat, because having two business houses, half of the GDP is not a Viksit Bharat. Right now, in 1% of India's rich people own more than 40% of the nation's wealth. What are we talking about in terms of Viksit Bharat? Having a number with 2 or 3 business houses owning that number, we are actually pushing India towards a slavery, and a slavery even worse than the British time, which is already now open a secret that right now we are in a even worse situation than the Britishers ruled us. And I call it, and sometimes I'll talk about it, how Gujarat is colonizing the entire country. It is so unfortunate that Gujarat model is being imposed upon everywhere, and a very classic example is Amul Doodh Pita Hai India. Why Amul Doodh has to be drunk by the whole of India? And you saw yesterday the Gujarat in Surendra Nagar, the Amul milk contamination and forgery was found, a racket was burst. So this whole idea that everything has to be happening in a Gujarat way is not a Viksit Bharat way. Gujarat model is not the right model to be put or imposed on in the country. And if there is any model to be really taken up, it has to be Kerala model. The entire education is free and now for until the graduation. Highest literacy rate. We can discuss about how socialism and communism, how socialism leads to communism or the vice versa, or what is the best option for now. But right now, we are neither socialist or following socialism. We have slipped into autocracy to some extent. And if an autocratic way of Viksit Bharat is going to happen, then I am not embarrassed to say that it is actually few boys who are looking like men and behaving like young boys and doing nasty things about everybody. And this is exactly how I see right now, that the old men with young boy mentality of playing with everyone, of destroying the harmony of the country, and talking about Viksit Bharat without young people, without women, without poor people, without farmers. The very four pillars they themselves talk about are the very four sector which is the most neglected sector at this moment in time. Look at the budget this year. Health budget reduced, food budget reduced, education budget reduced, research there is almost no money in research, by the way. Poverty alleviation reduced, water budget reduced, and Jal Jeevan Mission is going to go away because I work in water, I'm talking about it. So, what kind of Viksit Bharat are we talking about? These are no other than jumlas, as we already know. I will keep my fingers crossed that these four pillars of Viksit Bharat really find a place in making the Viksit Bharat, not in receiving the Viksit Bharat. Because if they only receive it, the youth of today, the poor of today, they will not receive a very healthy picture where the air is polluted, the water is polluted, because that's the challenge they have themselves written in their document or in their agenda. We are not working towards it. We don't have any budget for air pollution. Air pollution was not discussed this time in the parliament. Water pollution, it was not discussed, and I'm really embarrassed that this was also not raised by opposition parties. And anyway, they don't have voice, and speaker is always making them, silencing them. But this was not raised. These are genuine issues that we have now so much of land degradation, so much of grabbing of lakes and rivers and the land around it, so much of water pollution, so much of air pollution, so much of mental health crisis. Look at the way youth and children are dying left, right, and center. Just a few days ago, I was talking about those three girls who committed suicide, and they were addicted of digital world. That is what the current report talks about, but I have more concerns about it. But the anxiety of the youth level, who are going to be the leaders of tomorrow, is at the peak. And on top of it, the youth are not allowed to protest. I recall I have already spoken about it. But when they want to protest about examination cancellation, examination postponement, they want to protest about air, mothers, children, and youth, they all went to protest for air. Protest is completely suppressed. What kind of Viksit Bharat we are talking about? A Viksit Bharat with no democracy? I don't need that Viksit Bharat. It is not Vikas, it is Vinash, I think. And I remember one of my students once told me, ma'am, is it really a Vikas Purush or a Vinash Purush, the way things are going on? And I need to really continuously reflect upon what's going on at this moment. We don't need a Vikas where only few people are working upon and leading and letting everyone slip into slavery. We don't need Vikas where only men are talking about what is, and that to old men beyond 70. I think all politicians should retire after 60 as any other job. All politicians should have their education qualification exposed, because right now we are sitting with more than 25% of the politicians with criminal records. We don't need this kind of Viksit Bharat. We need a Viksit Bharat where we have youth talking about it, youth raising their voice. If we do not allow youth to raise their voice in the university today, we don't have leaders in 2047. If we don't allow women to talk about it today, we don't have women in 2047. If we let the children die out of water pollution, air pollution, medical problem, all those problems, accident problems, we don't have the leaders for 2027. there is a serious problem in Viksit Bharat agenda. It has to go out of those mad and bad boys and young boys deciding, sitting in a cozy room, probably somewhere in the island like the Epstein Island, and talking about a Viksit Bharat. I don't know, but it should not happen like that. It should be very open, transparent, and inclusive with the all four pillars: youth, poor, women, and farmers. They are out of the Viksit Bharat decision, so they are definitely out of the Viksit Bharat plan and percolation in the later stage. And I am completely against the very idea of Viksit Bharat. First of all, let the government decide whether it is going to be Bharat or India. I stand with India. I'm not so interested in the word Bharat anyways. So we can talk about India at 47, definitely a discussion which is required, 2047. We can discuss more about it some other time. And I would definitely like to share with all of you, how would I like to see India at 2047? For now, lot of things for you to munch, crunch, and think about it, and come back to me with your thoughts. Bye-bye and take care. Warm greetings from